M61 Vulcan, the gun that refused to die. Introduction. When speed broke the old rules, air combat didn't evolve gently, it snapped. Between the propeller age and the jet age, closing speeds multiplied so brutally that the assumptions of the World War II gunnery collapsed overnight. Pilots no longer had time to line up long bursts. Engagement shrank to fraction of seconds. Missiles promised salvation, but early guidance was unreliable. Seekers were fragile, and the rules of engagement were restrictive. In that narrow gap between theory and reality, one weapon proved as indispensable: the M61 Vulcan. It is not elegant, it is not subtle, it is a mechanical answer to a mathematical problem: how put the maximum number of lethal projectiles into a tiny volume of space in the shortest possible time. For that 60 for more than 60 years that answer had remained valid. Chapter 1: The Jet Age Crisis: Why Guns Nearly Died and Didn't. By 1945, the US military understood a harsh truth: jet fighters would cross at combined speed exceeding 1,500 kilometers per hour. A pilot might have less than 1 second inside a viable firing envelope. Traditional single-barrel cannons, even powerful ones, cannot guarantee enough hits during that fleeting window. Captured German research, particularly revolver cannon concepts, offered higher rates of fire, but they ran into limits: barrel heating, feeding reliability, and mechanical stress. The US Air Force wanted something radical, not incremental. Overkill by design. Missiles were expected to replace guns entirely. Vietnam shattered that illusion. Cloud cover, electronic countermeasures, visual identification rules, and simple unreliability meant pilots often found themselves close, fast, and out of missiles. In those moments, doctrine evaporated, guns decided survival. Chapter 2: Project Vulcan: Resurrecting an Old Idea for a New War. The solution came from an unlikely place: the 19th century. The Gatling principle, multiple barrels sharing heat and workload, had been abandoned decades earlier because it had required external power. Jet aircraft changed that. Electricity and hydraulics were suddenly abundant. Under Project Vulcan, engineers at General Electric revived and modernized this concept. Instead of gas operation, the gun would be externally powered. Instead of one barrel burning itself out, six barrels would rotate, each firing once per revolution. The result was counterintuitive but brilliant: low stress per barrel, exponentially higher total output. But experimentation with various calibers, the 20 into 102 mm cartridge, emerged as the ideal compromise: fast enough to hit jets, heavy enough to destroy them. The M61 was born. Chapter 3: Anatomy of a Monster. How the M61 works. At first glance, the M61 looks simple: six barrels, a rotating assembly, and an ammunition feed. In reality, it's a tightly synchronized industrial machine operating at absurd speed. Each barrel fires once per rotation. At 6,000 rounds per minute, the gun delivers roughly 100 rounds per second. The barrel rotates fast enough to prevent overheating, while electrically primed firing system countermeasures near perfect timing. Reliability is not an accident, it's an entire philosophy. Failures are measured in tens of thousands of rounds between stoppages. In aerial combat, where jam is death sentence, that reliability is worth more than theoretical accuracy. Chapter 4: Feeding the Beast. The linkless revolution. Earlier versions used linked ammunition that nearly killed the program. Ejected links became lethal debris, capable of damaging engines or airframes. The solution was the linkless feed system, a masterpiece of mechanical logistics. Rounds are stripped, fired, and the spent casings returned to the drum. Nothing leaves the aircraft. Center of gravity remains stable. Foreign object damage risk collapse. The feed system itself often weighs more than the gun, but without it the gun is useless. Was one of the hidden reasons gun pods failed early on. Integrating the feed externally introduced vibrations, misalignment, and inaccuracy. The Vulcan demanded internal integration. Fighters had to be designed around it. Chapter 5: Vietnam and the Reality Check in Blood and Aluminium. The M61 first true test came over Southeast Asia. Early engagement exposed painful truths. Missile-only fighters Like the early Phantoms struggled in close combats, gun pods vibrated, pods misaligned, pilots misread. Once the Vulcan was integrated internally, most notably on the F-4E, the results were immediate. Dogfights that would have ended in stalemates or sudden losses ended in kills. The Vulcan didn't require radar lock. It didn't care about countermeasures. If the Piper crossed the target, physics did the rest. Vietnam cemented the lessons. Guns were not obsolete. Bad assumptions were. Chapter 6: The Teen Series and Standardization of Violence. After Vietnam, no serious fighter design dominated a gun. The so-called Teen Series fighters, the F-14, F-15, F-16 and F-A-18, were all built around the M61 or its derivatives. Different airframes, same philosophy. The gun became the final option, the last argument. When missiles failed, when sensors were degraded, when engagement collapsed into chaos, the Vulcan remained. Even stealth didn't kill it. The F-22 carries a lighter M61A2 internally. Despite sensors fusion and beyond visual range dominance, designers still accepted the weight, complexity, and space cost. That decision alone, tells you everything. Chapter 7: Beyond Fighters, Ships, Ground, and Survival. The Vulcan refused to stay in the air. On ships, it evolved into the Phalanx, CIWS, a last-ditch defense against incoming missile. No guidance, no negotiation, just radar, queuing, and overwhelming fire. On land, systems like the M163 Vulcan air defense system turned the ground against helicopters and low-flying aircraft. Again, the pattern repeated. When reaction time is too short for missiles, brute force wins. Across domains, the logic remained identical. Chapter 8: Ammunition, the quiet half of lethality. A gun is only as effective as its ammunition. Over decades, the Vulcan fired API, HEI, SA, PHEI rounds, each optimized for different targets. Modern rounds balance penetration, fragmentation, and incendiary effects, turning even brief hits into catastrophic damage. At 6,000 rotations per minute, even a half-a-second burst puts dozens of explosive projectiles into a target volume. Survival becomes statistically unlikely. The modern era, still relevant, still feared. In December 2024, reports emerged of Ukrainian pilots using F-16s to shoot down cruise missiles, including with the M61. In an age of hypersonics and AI-guided weapons, a mid-20th century gun was still decisive. This is not nostalgia, this is engineering permanence. Chapter 10: Why the Vulcan Endures. Weapons usually die for one of the three reasons: they become unreliable, irrelevant, or replaceable. The M61 escaped all three traps. It is reliable because it externalizes energy and distributes stress. It is relevant because physics still gonna still governs close range combat. It is irreplaceable because no missile can guarantee hits inside a split-second window the way a wall of metal can. The Vulcan doesn't promise precision, it promises probability. It delivers probability. In war, probability is power. Conclusion: the last honest weapon. The M61 Vulcan is not smart. It doesn't think, it doesn't negotiate with countermeasures or interpret sensor data. It simply converts electrical power into kinetic certainty at industrial scale. For 60 years, aircraft designers, naval architects, and battlefield planners have all reached the same conclusion independently. When everything else falls, the Vulcan still works. This is why it remains. This is why it endures. This is why it refuses to die.